There is a photograph. 9 young people, students, friends, some of them in love with each other, all of them experts at surviving the most brutal winters on Earth. This photograph was taken on February 1st, 1959. It was the last photograph ever taken of them alive. What happened next on a frozen mountain in the Soviet Union has never been explained. Their tent was found sliced open from the inside. Their boots left behind. Their coats left behind. Their food untouched, still on the plate. And their bodies, scattered across the mountain, half naked, in -40 degrees, with injuries that the Soviet medical examiner described as comparable to a car crash. 2 were missing their eyes. 1 was missing her tongue. Several had radioactive clothing. And on the night they died, dozens of witnesses reported seeing glowing orange spheres floating silently above the mountain. The Soviet government sealed the investigation files for 30 years. When they finally released them, pages were missing. Russia reopened the case in 2019. They closed it again without a conclusive answer. In 2022, Swiss scientists published what they called the definitive explanation. And yet, it still does not explain the missing eyes. It does not explain the missing tongue. It does not explain the radioactivity. And it does not explain the orange lights. Before we talk about how they died, you need to know who they were, because this is not just a mystery. It is the story of 9 real human beings, with names, with dreams, with people who loved them. Igor Dyatlov, 23 years old, engineering student, the leader. His friends described him as wonderfully knowledgeable, always prepared. Someone you could always rely on. All that's interesting, he had personally designed the group's equipment. He had led expeditions before. He was, by every measure, the kind of person you want in charge when things go wrong. Zinaida Kolmogorova, 22 years old, one of 2 women on the trip, described as energetic, fearless, and deeply loved by everyone in the group. Her diary entries from the journey are warm and funny. She was teasing her friends constantly. Ludmila Dubinina, 20 years old, the younger of the 2 women, a passionate hiker who had already completed multiple difficult expeditions. She was the one who would later be found, missing her tongue. Yuri Krivonashenko, 23 years old, known for his sense of humor, the joker of the group. He had worked at a nuclear facility, a detail that would later become significant. Semyon Zolotaryov, 38 years old, the oldest member by far, a professional sports instructor who had specifically requested to join this particular group. He was a mysterious figure, experienced, tough, but an outsider to the tight friend group that made up the rest of the team. He would later be buried in a separate cemetery from the others, a detail that has never been explained. On January 27, the group set off on a 14-day expedition to the Ural Mountain in the northern Ural Mountains. The route was classified Category 3, the most dangerous category available in the Soviet Union at the time. Every single member of this group had completed multiple difficult winter expeditions before this one. They knew what they were doing. They were prepared for everything. Everything except what was waiting for them. On January 28, one member of the group and walked home Yuri Yudin decided to turn back. He was suffering from knee and joint pain that made continuing impossible. He said goodbye to his 9 friends. He watched them disappear into the snow. He turned around. It was the luckiest thing that ever happened to him. He never saw any of them alive again. On February 1st, the group began moving through the pass toward Mount Otorten. As they pushed toward the base, a snowstorm hit. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. They lost their direction and accidentally veered west, toward the slope of a different mountain entirely. Lost in history. The mountain the local Mansi people called Kolitsayakal, the mountain of the dead. The hikers realized their mistake near nightfall. At that point, Igor Dyatlov made a decision that has puzzled experts ever since. Instead of retreating back downhill, he decided they would camp right there, on the open slope, on the mountain of the dead. His reasoning was simple. He did not want to lose the altitude they had already climbed. They set up camp, cutting into the slope with shovels to create a flat surface for the tent. Food was sliced and ready on a plate. Boots and coats were neatly arranged inside. Several of the group wrote in their diaries before sleeping, ordinary entries about an ordinary evening on the mountain. Nothing in their words suggests fear. Nothing suggests anything was wrong. Lost in history. Sometime between midnight and 2 in the morning, something happened. Something so terrifying, so immediate, so overwhelming. They grabbed their knives. and they cut their only shelter open from the inside. And they ran, barefoot, in -40 degrees, into the dark. When investigators arrived at the campsite on February 26th, 26 days after the group had gone silent, the first thing they noticed was the tent. It had been cut open, but the cut had been made from the inside. Most of the team's belongings were still there. Several pairs of shoes, coats, food still on the plate. 8 or 9 sets of footprints led away from the tent. Many of them clearly made by people wearing only socks or a single boot or nothing at all. All that's interesting. The investigators followed the footprints. Beneath an old cedar tree, more than a mile from the tent, they found the first 2 bodies. Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonashenko. They were dressed only in socks and underwear. The tree branches above them were broken, up to 5 meters high, suggesting they had tried to climb it. Perhaps to see something. Perhaps to escape something. Between the cedar tree and the tent, they found 3 more bodies. Igor Dyatlov, Zinaida Kalmogorova, Rustam Slobodin. All 3 were in positions that suggested they had been trying to crawl back toward the tent when they died. All 3 had died from hypothermia. 5 bodies found, for still missing. The remaining 4 bodies were not found until May, when the snow finally melted enough to reveal what lay beneath. They were found in a ravine, buried under 4 meters of snow. And this, right here, is where the case stops being explainable. 2 of the 4 had fractured skulls. 2 more had major chest fractures. And Lyudmila Dubinina, the 20-year-old woman with the warm smile and the fearless spirit, was missing her tongue. Completely gone. The medical examiner's report described the force required to cause these internal injuries as comparable to a car crash. At high speed, there was no car. There were no external wounds on the skin. No bruising. No cuts. No signs of any external impact at all. Just catastrophically broken bones from the inside. But it gets worse. Some of the hikers' clothing was found to contain significant levels of radiation. In the middle of the remote Ural Mountains, with no nuclear facility, no weapons test site, no possible source anywhere nearby. And the hiker's skin. A 12-year-old boy named Yuri Kuntsevich, who attended 5 of the hikers' funerals, recalled decades later that their skin had a deep brown tan. They had been found in the middle of a frozen Russian winter, in complete darkness, under 4 meters of snow, with a tan. And then the lights. Another group of hikers camped 50 kilometers south of the incident reported seeing strange orange spheres in the sky to the north, on the exact night the Dyatlov group died. Similar spheres were observed in the area continuously during February and March 1959, by multiple independent witnesses including the Meteorology Service and the military. These sightings were not included in the original 1959 investigation. The Soviet government looked at all of this evidence. The torn tent, the barefoot footprints, the internal injuries with no external cause, the radioactivity, the missing tongue, the orange lights in the sky, and their official conclusion was, the hikers died as a result of a compelling natural force. Lost in history, they closed the case, they sealed the files, and they said nothing more. In the 65 years since, 6 major theories have been put forward. Let us go through every single one. Theory 1. The avalanche. In 2021, 2 Swiss scientists from the École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne published a detailed scientific paper arguing that the group was struck by a rare slab avalanche, a type of snowslide where a large slab of compacted snow breaks away from a weaker layer beneath it. Their computer models showed that the cut the hikers made in the slope to pitch their tent may have destabilized the snow above them, and that strong katabatic winds could have deposited enough snow hours later to trigger a small but deadly slab release. This is the most scientifically credible theory. It explains the internal injuries. A slab of snow hitting a sleeping body can cause broken ribs and skull fractures without leaving external marks. It explains the panic. Waking up to an avalanche in total darkness at -40 would cause any rational person to run. But it does not explain why Lyudmila Dubinina was missing her tongue. All that's interesting, it does not explain the radioactivity. It does not explain the orange lights. And it does not explain why Semyon Zolotaryov, the oldest member, was buried in a separate, prestigious, closed-access cemetery far from the others. The Ural Mountains in 1959 were a hotbed of Soviet military activity. Secret test sites, classified projects, rocket programs that did not officially exist. The radioactive clothing, the orange spheres in the sky, these details point directly at military involvement. Yuri Krivonashenko, one of the hikers, had previously worked at a nuclear facility called Chelyabinsk 40. The same facility that had suffered a catastrophic nuclear accident just 2 years earlier in 1957, an accident the Soviet government had covered up completely. Was Krivonischenko carrying contaminated clothing from his previous work? Or had the group stumbled into the path of a classified military test? A parachute mine perhaps? Or an experimental pressure weapon that could cause internal injuries without external damage? The Soviet government's immediate classification of the files suggests something was being hidden. The missing pages from the investigation records suggest something was removed. And the separate burial of Zolotaryov, the mysterious older outsider who had specifically requested to join this particular group, raises the darkest question of all. Was Zolotaryov sent to watch them? Something we cannot explain. This is the theory that no serious scientist will put their name to. And yet, it is the theory that the evidence most stubbornly refuses to rule out. The orange spheres seen by multiple independent witnesses on the night of February 1st have never been explained. They were not weather phenomena. They were not known aircraft. They were observed by the meteorology service, by the military, by civilian hikers 50 kilometers away. The radioactivity on the clothing has never been satisfactorily sourced. The tongue has never been explained. The eyes have never been explained. And the Soviet government's decision to immediately classify, seal, and partially destroy the investigation records, for 30 years, for a case they officially claimed was simply a natural accident, has never been explained. Why do you seal the files on an accident? There is one more person in this story, the most important person of all. Yuri Yudin, the one who turned back. Yuri Yudin spent the rest of his life trying to find out what killed his friends. He attended every investigation. He gave testimony at every reopening of the case. He studied every theory. He never stopped. He said in an interview late in his life, "I always felt guilty that I survived, and I always felt I owed it to them to find out the truth." He died in 2013, 54 years after waving goodbye to his 9 friends on a frozen mountainside. He died without an answer. All that's interesting. Igor Dyatlov, 23 years old. Zinaida Kalmogorova, 22. Lyudmila Dubinina, 20. Yuri Krivonischenko, 23. Semyon Zolotaryov, 38. The mountain pass was named after Igor Dyatlov. People travel there every year from all over the world to stand on the slope where it happened, to look at the sky, to wonder. In 2019, 60 years after the deaths, Russia reopened the investigation. They considered only 3 possible explanations: avalanche, slab avalanche, or hurricane. The possibility of a crime had been officially discounted. They closed it again 18 months later, with no conclusive answer. 9 experienced hikers, on a mountain they had climbed before, on a route they had prepared for months, with every piece of equipment they needed to survive. Something made them cut open their only shelter. Something made them abandon their boots. Something made them run barefoot into -40 degrees into the dark. Something broke their ribs and their skulls from the inside without touching their skin. Something removed a tongue. Something put radiation on their clothes. Something lit orange spheres in the sky above the mountain that night. And something convinced the Soviet government, immediately, to seal every record of what happened and lock it away for 30 years. The case is officially unsolved. The files are partially classified. The mountain is still there. And whatever was on that slope, on the night of February 1st, 1959, has never been found.